And let us pray. Gracious God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be graced by your wisdom and your love. Amen. So today marks a turning point in our faith story. All through Lent, we have been following Jesus through his ministry. We have seen the high points and we have seen the low points. We have seen water turned into wine and the dead raised. All stories told so that we may believe that through this man Jesus, God is present with us in our daily living, our daily struggles, and present in the struggles of the world. That if we would know God and know what it is to live a good and noble life, if we would see lives healed and a world at peace, we would remember that it all comes down to love. Powerful, redemptive, unconditional love. Yet as we follow Jesus on his preaching journey, we also know that the human heart can turn to stone very easily. That there are those times where what we deem as ours by right is threatened, or when resources become scarce, our fear builds and our hearts can become hard as a rock. And we've learned that when hearts turn to stone, it can keep us from hearing and seeing and being the love that is the only answer to the cries of the world in which we live. We're blind to the love that we know to be ours, and we're blind to the love that we know we are called to be for others. And so it is that our story takes a turn today. Along with those first hearers and disciples of Jesus, the time of being taught of what is important, the power of love, the power of mercy and community, and the looking out for the littlest and the least among us, the time of all of that teaching is over. It's over because today is the day we hear of how Jesus pauses for a moment with his friends before his final descent into Jerusalem. Because you see, tomorrow he goes to the capital city. Tomorrow he goes to the center of the nation's power. Tomorrow he goes on what some people would call a fool's errand. You see, the religious authorities have already made their hearts stone when it comes to Jesus and his radical teachings on love and mercy. And so they have sent out word that there's a rich reward waiting for the person who is willing to tell them where they can find Jesus so that he might be arrested and then put to death. Fearful of his message, fearful of his power among the people, fearful that their own places of power and privilege or places of honor might be taken from them, they resolve that Jesus must die so that their place in the world might live. Jesus knew what waited for him in Jerusalem. He knew. Yet he also knew that he still had to go. He knew that the kind of love he was wanting people to know and to be, well, that kind of love can never shy away from the realities of the world. Never shy away. In fact, the kind of love he was preaching and living out was created for this very thing. To courageously love in the face of anger or tyranny, violence, and oppression is the way that divine love becomes unleashed. And that's what Jesus' ministry and life is all about, unleashing that redemptive power of divine love. But Jerusalem is for tomorrow. And like Jesus, we pause for an evening among friends. An evening where, in relative safety of the town of Bethany, in the home of Lazarus, Mary, and Martha, we too gather for a feast among loved ones. Yet even amid all the fine food and laughter and shared stories, all the things that we do when we gather together with people we care about and know very well, amid all of those things, none of us can escape the shadow that lurks in the corner of our minds. The shadow that casts a dark pall on our joy. The shadow, death is coming. All who have gathered at the meal can feel its approach. All can feel that heaviness of heart and that sense of foreboding that this particular fear always brings. And like most humans, the gathered friends don't really want to talk about such an unpleasant reality. You know, best to keep things light. It's a party after all, so let's keep it light. Best to compliment Martha on that delicious meal, right? Let's do that. Let's tell a few jokes. In silent agreement, all of the friends gather and pretend that everything is not about to change forever. How often do we do that? All of them except Mary. See, Mary alone, she is not into pretending. Mary alone acknowledges what the others are too uncomfortable or too afraid to acknowledge. Jesus is going to die. He's going to die, and it's going to be a horrible death. You see, when you threaten the status quo in first century Palestine, when you come up against the imperial power of Rome and the religious power of the temple elites, like Jesus came up against those things, you're branded a revolutionary who deserves crucifixion. Everybody knows that. And everybody knows that Jesus is going to Jerusalem in the morning. Everyone knows he's going to have a horrible death. One where he will be denied justice, be denied a fair trial, he will be denied mercy and denied a decent burial. So Mary, having no words to express all that she's feeling, she has no words to express her deep gratitude for all that Jesus has done for her family, like when he raised her brother. No words to express her gratitude that he thought she was worthy to be taught, even though she was a mere woman. He taught her because she was worthy and equal and had value. No words to express that gratitude. And she had no words to express her fear and grief at his impending execution. And so, having no words, she does the only thing that she can think of. She shows her love. So, breaking all conventions of respectable society, the convention that would say, you have a slave wash the feet of your honored guest, breaking the convention of women never touching a man in public, especially a man who was not her husband, the convention of never allowing people outside of her family to see her hair, Mary silently enters the room, unbinds her hair, washes Jesus' feet with her tears, and dries them with her hair. She then takes this costly perfume, costing about the equivalent of a year's salary, and she anoints Jesus' feet, and the smell of the perfume permeates the whole room, permeates the whole house. And in this act of anointing his feet, she is, in fact, preparing his body for burial, knowing that when the world does its worst to Jesus, there will be no time for such preparations. And in so doing, she is engaging in one final act of love. And Mary's act of love was also an act of profound truth. When faced with death, no matter if it's physical death or the death that comes from a world that seems hell-bent on violence and oppression, or the kind of death that comes when a society views that relationships are somehow inconsequential and disposable, when love is offered in the face of such things, it has the power of life in it. Love has the power of life in it. Love offered unconditionally without counting the cost in dollars or reputation is an act of life, even in the face of very real death. The kind of love Mary showed is the power of redemptive love, that God, the Holy, takes death, whatever form death comes in, and out of that death brings life. Yet clearly Mary's act of truth was simply too much for the other guests. It was so over the top. Perhaps the scandal of a woman behaving in such a shameful manner was too much for them. Or maybe the power of that moment overwhelmed them, right? The power of that moment. Because love can do that. The power of love so openly demonstrated can easily overwhelm us because it's so real and it's so raw and it's so intense. Or perhaps they simply did not want to acknowledge that their beloved friend was going to die and that he was going to die very soon. So whatever their reasons, no one in that room objected when Judas tried to change the subject. And how often do we do that? When faced with uncomfortable feelings, we want to change the subject. So, taking the opportunity to move away from this intimate scene of profound love, Judas raises his concern over cost and how the money could have been better spent. I can well imagine that many people in that room, more than a few of them anyway, would have nodded in agreement. Well, absolutely, Judas, that money could have been better spent, right? After all, had Jesus himself not taught over and over and over again that we need to care for the poor and the widowed and the orphan, and a year's wages would go an awful long way to doing just that. Judas had a point, and a very good one at that. Thank you very much. Yet Jesus, friend, teacher, confidant, and role model to all of those gathered, did not agree with Judas, did not accept Judas' point as being a good one. In fact, Jesus said, "Leave her alone. She bought this perfume for the day of my burial. The poor will always be with you, but you will not always have me." You see, Jesus was about to do something of singular significance when he went to Jerusalem. He was going to show in one final action that the power of love should and can stand in the face of all that is wrong in this world. He wasn't saying that the poor should not be cared for. He was making a different point. He was making the point that love, that profound, raw, intense, unconditional love that doesn't care about polite society, doesn't care about social rules, is the only power that will topple tyrants, raise the poor from their poverty, and heal our hearts and heal our homes. We all live in a different time than Jesus did. But we live in pretty similar circumstances because humans are humans. So our circumstances are fairly similar to the ones that Jesus, Mary, and Judas found themselves in. We too live in a time where we can find really good and noble reasons not to show the depth of our love. Lots of good and noble reasons not to show the depth of our love. Surely it is a risky thing to be that loyal, that trusting, and intimate when faced with certain death-dealing realities in which we find ourselves. Better to play it safe. Surely people will recoil or draw back from such demonstrations on our part. Surely we'll lose some of our dignity if we show our love in such a way. Surely our limited budgets, whether that's the budgets of our time, the budgets of our money, or emotions, or energy, surely all of those limited resources need to be invested more wisely so that we can meet those lofty goals that Jesus calls us to, the lofty goals of our faith. And you know what? All of those statements are probably true. To demonstrate our love is risky, illogical, and not at all prudent. But we are not called to be prudent. We are not called to be safe. We are not called to be followers of social conventions. We are called to be followers of the one who showed us that if we are to do something of singular significance, then we too face the powers of chaos and death with the only thing we have, our ability to love, and to love with abandon. Now, we've all sat through sermons that would end now by saying, so go and be loving. I end almost all of my sermons that way. I really only have one sermon, and it's about love. It's true. But today that ending seems a little bit shallow to me. Maybe a better ending would be to ask ourselves, what is it that keeps us, or me, from showing our love as intensely as Mary showed hers? Or what would happen if we unleashed our love in the face of our own struggles with others? What if we had just simply unleashed our love in whatever struggle we're facing? Right? What if we, as a community of faith, let loose the power of our love in Salmon Arm and didn't count the cost? What's the worst thing that could happen? Perhaps, as the story of Jesus and Mary reminds us, maybe we will lose a little of our precious dignity or our sense of propriety. But maybe, just maybe, that is how we actually find our life. Maybe. What do you think? It's something to think about anyway. May it be so in your life and in mine. Amen.
Amen.